everyone, I'm Jess, and you are watching Discern with Jim Dennison. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Jess, good to be with you today.
Good to see you. So our topic today is about Netflix, and unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard the news about this show called Squid Game. And I guess I'm one of those people who's been living under a rock because I haven't watched it, but it has become very popular. It's gone viral. The internet loves it. And so, yeah, that's going to be our topic for today. From NBC News, Squid Game is more than just a runaway hit for Netflix. It's also the internet's favorite show. It was released on September 17th. The 9-episode Korean thriller is poised to become Netflix's biggest non-English language show in the world, said Netflix's co-CEO Ted Sarandos. The show follows Song Ji-hun, played by Lee Jung-jae, as he and hundreds of other desperate and deeply indebted contestants compete in a violent and often grotesque competition for about $38 million. Only one person can win the prize, and those who lose pay with their lives. Squid Game is on track to become Netflix's biggest show of all time, even though it is brutal, violent, and dark. And we're also just learning that it has gathered nearly 111 million views just in its first month. Shows like this and movies like this in this age of social media and the internet, things go viral so fast. And yeah, how should we as Christians choose what shows to watch or movies to watch and what kind of entertainment to expose ourselves to whenever they become so popular?
Yeah, it's something we have to ask ourselves every day because we're more surrounded by media and news than absolutely ever before. And the boundaries aren't what they used to be. Used to be that if a movie was PG or PG-13, you knew it was going to be safe for you and probably for your kids. If it was R, you had to think about it. If it was in primetime television, you didn't have to worry about it. If it was in network TV, that's no longer true. Certainly not true about music and music video as well. So we have to be discerning here. As Jesus said, to be wise as serpents, harmless as doves, to absolutely be discerning about what we're allowing into our minds and into our hearts. Plato felt like music had to be censored because it went past the mind to the heart. And he felt that art was itself such a powerful medium that it had to be censored very, very carefully. And he was in a sense right about that. When you watch a show like this, when you watch other programming, you have to pay attention to what it does to you. You have to pay attention to how you're feeling on the other side, how you're responding. Are you manifesting the fruit of the Spirit as a result of this? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Are you more like Christ or less like Christ? What's happening inside you? So that's one thought. A second thought would be to be aware of your own areas of challenge and temptation, what the Puritans used to call the besetting sins. Some technology, some media is obviously off limits. Nudity, I would say, is off limits. Pornography is off limits. But I have friends who are dealing with alcohol addiction, and for them, watching people drink alcohol on television can be a triggering event. I know other people that have spent time in the occult, and for them, any horror movie, any occultic movie is especially dangerous. So know what your triggering issues are. Know what your own besetting sins are, what your own issues are. And then a third piece very quickly is to watch your witness. Be careful about going to a movie that someone else could see you walk out of and question your faith as a result. Or know that you were watching on television or whatever. Be very careful because where you go, Jesus goes. And when people see you, they see Christ. They judge Christ by Christians. So if we'll think about our witness, think about our own issues, our own particular besetting sins, as it were, and watch what this does to us, I think we'll have some good guidelines for knowing how to consume media more effectively.
What you said about, people's different sin tendencies or temptations, that I've seen that in my life. There are some things that I know, like I'll get on IMDb and you can look at the little parental guidelines. And so I typically do that just because I know I need to know if there's XYZ in this. And so it definitely does depend. It can vary from person to person. And I also would think that it can vary just depending on what kind of emotional and mental state you're in too. Sometimes I know I've watched things that were darker and heavier, and although the content was good and I found it interesting, it negatively affected me and I just had to stop watching it, even though I didn't necessarily want to. But I think sometimes we have to make a hard call of saying, man, am I watching this just so I can say that I've watched it? Or is this really beneficial to me? So, when it comes to a show like Squid Game, how do we determine what methods can we use to determine whether or not this is something we should watch?
We have to do research here. Again, back in the old days, you could kind of depend on rating systems, which are much less relevant outside of mainstream movies anyway. There are various websites that I go to. There's a family movie review, for instance, that I consult if I'm deciding whether or not to watch a movie, especially if it's R-rated, but even PG-13 sometimes. And that particular site will give you categories. It will rate content relative to sex and nudity, relative to violence, relative to profanity, relative to substance use, that sort of thing. It will also give you a synopsis and kind of tell you essentially what you're going to see relative to these various categories. Helps me to know what I should see, what my kids should see, what my grandchildren should see, things like that. There are also Christian movie review sites that are available online where Christians are doing the exact same thing relative to spiritual values, relative to biblical values. As you mentioned, Jess, you can just go to IMDb and see a little description there as to why it's rated R, for instance, and you'll see words even there, relative to nudity or violence or whatever it might be. And so you can get a heads up just even with that. So doing research ahead of time in order to know what this is before you get there is just critical.
Jim, when we were talking earlier, you said that it's sometimes helpful for you to put content into one of 4 categories. Can you explain what those are?
Yeah, and they're in kind of a spectrum, I think. The one we've discussed a little bit already, and that's a bucket of things that we can't see, that we cannot watch, that we're not allowed as believers or even just as human beings to see and to go to, and we've discussed some of that. On the opposite spectrum is entertainment media that we ought to enjoy. The Lord is a God of creativity, as you mentioned earlier. He's a God of art. I was reading in Ezekiel the other day a description of the new temple, and it describes a kind of inscriptions that are to be in the walls of that temple. And these inscriptions serve no architectural purpose. They don't make the building any stronger, any more accessible. It's just a design element to demonstrate the creativity of our Creator. And He wants us, I think, to enjoy that. I don't think we need to pull back from so-called secular art just because it's secular art. There's a lot that we can enjoy, whether it's music or it's video, movie, whatever it might be. On a third category, kind of a third bucket, is that which we can utilize. And this is, I think, Squid Game kind of an example of that without even having to see it. I haven't seen it myself. I don't intend to see it. I think it's too dark. It's not something I want to go do. But I want to know enough about it to be able to use it for conversation's sake, to be able to kind of meet people at a point of common ground. It's John 4 where the woman comes for water, so Jesus starts with water and leads her to living water. It's Acts 17 where Paul quotes Greek philosophers to talk to Greek philosophers. We have to know the culture, have to know especially what's popular, because that's such a window into the culture. These people that do this for a living are really good at it, obviously. They know what's popular. They know what we want. I don't think it's any surprise that superhero movies have become so popular in recent years with pandemics and so many challenges around us, that sort of thing. So we can learn from the culture. We can engage people on the basis of this. And then a fourth category is to reframe content. And that is to learn from it in a way that we can use bad even for good. For example, I have a very dear friend, a counselor, who's taught his kids a game he calls Spot the Lie. They're watching television together, and if they see something on television that just isn't true, that is wrong biblically, it's immoral, whatever, they're supposed to say that's a lie. They're supposed to spot the lie. Now, they don't make it a paranoid sort of a thing. It's just kind of a game they play. But he's teaching his kids to be discerning. He's teaching his kids to measure culture through Scripture rather than Scripture through culture, even at an early stage. Whether you have kids or grandkids at home or not, it's something we can do. Spot the lie and learn how to use the lie to speak the truth in love. I think that's a way of approaching culture that really does redeem it in a way that can advance the kingdom.
I feel like what you said of when we watch these things, we are watching with a filter and kind of just sifting out what is useful, what is good, what is true. Would you say that people can have different convictions about, what they can watch?
That's a terrific question, absolutely, and a very practical question as well. I'm thinking of Paul's response to the Corinthians about eating meat offered to idols, and it was fine for him, but he knew it wouldn't be good for them, so he chose not to do it. That sort of a conversation. So there absolutely are gray areas. Now, I think there are black and white areas too. We've already discussed those. In my mind, nudity is always wrong. Pornography is always wrong for a variety of levels. The reasons we could talk about how it subjugates women and even men, how it can be so pervasive in the culture, how it can be so addictive so quickly, all of that. I think that's absolutely off limits. But there are other R-rated movies where violence is the reason it's rated R, or maybe profanity, or maybe drug use or something like that. And that's not a triggering issue for me, but it might be for somebody else. I happen not to struggle with substance abuse. Not bragging, that just happens to be the case for me. I have other areas where I do struggle. That just happens not to be one. So I can watch a movie that's almost glorifying drinking or something, or alcoholics, and not be bothered by that. I have a very, very dear friend who can't do that. Absolutely can't, because he still struggles with alcoholism. And so as we're talking about these things, if he takes the position, I should not watch it because of his problem, that maybe isn't the right place to be. Or if I take the position, he should be able to watch it because it's not a problem for me, that's the wrong position. The right place in these gray areas is to give each other grace for where we're coming from. Grace for our besetting sins, grace for our issues, grace for our family stories. There may be something that happened in your past that makes that storyline especially impossible for you to watch, but for somebody else, it's not an issue. And so grace is the question here, isn't it? It's offering other people the right. It's learning how to disagree agreeably. It's offering each other grace and not enforcing my opinions on other people, while at the same time being steadfast about absolute biblical morality. There's a balance in there. It's a tough place to be sometimes, but that's the balance to seek, I think.
Jim, you've given us a lot of helpful tools and methods and language surrounding, what we should and shouldn't watch and how to filter it well. That's all we have for you guys today. We'll see you tomorrow here on Discern.